Welcome back to Free Beer Friday After Dark. Vito, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a little warm up here. Summer's kicking in California, so I'm kind of getting sweaty, but cold beer could change all that and make me happy.
Well, let's have a beer. Let's talk about what we're up to, and let's answer some questions.
Let's do it. Woo!
All right, Vito, what are we drinking this week?
So we've got Maui Wowie from Altamont Brewing. As we mentioned before, we dropped a video where we go over all this amazing beer and Altamont Brewing. Check out that video. It's on our YouTube channel now.
So it's been pretty cool, your relationship with Steve and Altamont. You got to brew a beer with him. He's gonna help us out with this recipe.
Yeah, I love Steve, love Norby, the whole crew down there at Altamont. They started as home brewers, all of them, and now they're commercial brewers, just crushing it. They're actually building out a new production facility. They're growing at a time when kind of beer, as a lot of people are shrinking. So it's really because it's really well-run place and they make amazing beer.
This last month's been a pretty cool month. We both had birthdays. In fact, I got to brew with Vito on his birthday.
That's right. It was on my birthday. That was a good little present there to make some beer. We made something one of my favorite beers. I think one of yours too.
Oh yeah, Blind Pig. It's such an awesome beer, and I'm gonna take that beer camping. That's gonna be pretty fun because not only are we using, the Grainfather in there, but also X3, which was killer. And then I put it into that plastic PET keg.
The Oxbar kegs, yeah.
The Oxbar keg. So since we're going camping, I'll try to get some footage of that. But I figured, why bring a stainless keg up there? It's gonna get dirty. It could get all scratched up. So it'll be perfect camping beer.
Yeah, one of the other cool things I did this month was a talk at my local homebrew club. So Club Doze did a talk about koji, brewing with koji specifically. You guys might have saw the video we did last month with Bear Bottle, where we did a koji rice lager. I also did a koji IPA with Heretic Brewing. So did a bunch of commercial brews. So just kind of wanted to share what I learned on those brews with my homebrew club. If there is a local homebrew club by you, check them out. That is, to me, that's kind of like my favorite thing. It's all about the community in the beer community, craft beer, but then homebrewing. The homebrew club is kind of where it's at as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, clubs serve this awesome purpose, and this isn't a show about clubs, but I think we both promote them. And I think one of the best thing is you got like-minded people who love the same hobby. That's always great. And you get real-time feedback on your beer. It's the fastest way for you to get real experienced people trying your beer and giving you that feedback in a non-competitive environment. You're not entering a contest to get this. You're just bringing your beer and sharing it.
Yeah, great feedback loops. There's always a speaker, so you're learning things. I'm always leaving the meeting just ready to try something new. So I love that.
So now it's time for us to answer your questions. So the first question is a two-part question. The first is bottling your beer from a keg, now that it's time for NHC. And the second part of that question is shipping your beer. And we've got, obviously, experience with both. So why don't you tell us about bottling?
I always like to use a counter pressure filler. So it allows me to pre-purge the bottle, which I'm going into with CO2. And always go a little extra. DO, picking up dissolved oxygen is not gonna make your beer shine. So run it a little longer if it's for competition, right? Because we really care about it. Another thing I like to do is, after sanitizing, chill the bottles. It helps keep down that foaming, so you're not just gonna foam.
You're trying to do the least amount of damage to your beer. That's the goal. You're trying to change its atmospheric pressure the least, its temperature the least, its oxygen level the least. That's your goal. So in our opinion, counter pressure bottle fillers are really the only way to do that properly. We both use one. The one I use, actually, I have a pressure gauge on the out. So I know what the pressure in the bottle is versus the pressure I'm putting on the keg. I love that because then I can make that differential. I can find that delta T and slow it down with a little relief valve.
One thing, Chris, that I think that you brought to my attention, which I never worried about as much anymore, but the oxygen barrier caps that most homebrew shops and we sell, you don't want to get those wet.
Yeah. So the liner that you're using on there scavenges oxygen when it gets wet. So if you pre-sanitize it, put it in liquid, it's going to scavenge the oxygen that's available to it and its job is done. So I've always been told to keep them as clean and sanitary as possible. So when I open a bag, I usually reseal that bag again between times I'm using them because I rarely need a whole batch. I just need a couple. The other thing I would say about counter pressure bottle filling is go with the idea, if I need to ship 2, I'm going to bottle 6. And the first 2 are just my warm up. I'm probably going to just keep them. I'll taste them later. Then maybe 3 and 4, 5 and 6 are like, I'm going to choose the best 2 that I felt flowed the best, capped the best. Sometimes that seal, when you're capping it, you just want to get it all perfect. And then depending on what kind of beer it is, if it can lay down long enough, bottle a few more because you might need them for second round if you get lucky.
Yeah, if you're not going to rebrew it, you better have it around in case your keg blew. I love having, like you said, that extra bottle to when I get my tasting notes back, to crack it open, drink that beer as I ingest those notes as well. So it's just good to kind of get that feedback loop.
It can feel real good or it can feel real bad.
Yeah.
But let's talk about shipping them now.
Yeah, let's move over to shipping.
Yeah, so you got this bottle. It should be without any markings. So usually whatever contest you're in, let's just say the NHC on this one, they will send you a label they want on that front, and never just put that label on there by itself. We put them in Ziploc bags and then use rubber bands around that to hold it to the bottle itself. That way, if you have a breaker somewhere in there, it doesn't wipe your label out, because you get that wet and nobody's going to be able to read it.
Yeah, and I've actually, that's saved me and friends of mine that are in the club, where the bottle breaks and then they'll contact you because they have that label that's sealed in plastic and say, hey, yeah, you've got 5 days to get me another bottle. So you could, use that to get another bottle out there. So always put the and I think they say that in the instructions, but follow this is the time where you read the instructions and follow them, right?
We'll usually take the whole thing, figure out which box it's going to go into, line that entire box with a trash bag. So we just, put it in there. So now you're putting the whole thing into, we used a case box last time. So you had the dividers, put all of that in the plastic bag, put it in there, then put the bottles in, then put a couple ice packs, then some responsible filler, that soft material. Please do not use packing peanuts. The people who have to open these hate that. Yeah. Or shredded paper is even worse. And then when it comes to shipping, it's worth the money typically to pay a little bit extra to get it there in a minimum 3 days. I would vote for 2. I don't think next day is always necessary, but 2 days is probably your sweet spot, but it does start to get expensive.
All right, Chris, here's an interesting one. So for certain styles of beer, the question they asked, specifically New England IPA, is it ever okay to keg while there's still fermentation left to go?
The answer is yes. Question mark when to do it. There's no scientific thing unless you're brewing the same beer over and over again and you know what your attenuation is going to be. You know where you can put that in the keg and know you're going to be good. Now, this is an argument for spunding. And cranking the spunding up near the end of fermentation is my preferred method rather than just straight kegging. But I think you're safe to say if you know you should be at a 10-16 final gravity and you're at 10-18, you're probably fine to keg. But the problem is you're going to shut off this fermentation pretty quick if you cool it down right away. If you just keg and let it sit there, that's okay. It'll start building up carbonation for you. But if you cool it right away, you're going to inhibit any more fermentation. So thusly, you're going to have a little bit sweeter of a beer.
Yeah, I'm gonna go a little opposite and say I wouldn't recommend it. And just from a commercial brewing standpoint, I always want to get, even if it's a hazy IPA, I want that yeast out of there. I don't want yeast to make their way into my vessel, cause possibly atelectasis later, things like that, off flavors. I know hazy IPAs, we want them raw and fresh. But even on my hazy IPAs, I always cold crashed, get that yeast out of solution, stop the fermentation from continuing to go. You could still get a huge hop flavor and biotransformation, and you don't need to package unfinished beer. So I would say always do those steps. It's going to lead to a better belly, and just a better beer experience.
I'll concede to that. That is the real right answer. Yeah, but his question, yes, you can do it.
You can.
Yeah. And you'll reuse a little bit of that carbonation. I think that's really what he was trying to get to. Can I get that carbonation going without having to do it
like
all?
cask ale, kind of
exactly.
That real live ale or live beer,
But your variables are huge. And what's going to affect that beer flavor is all over the place. I think some people are a little mistaken thinking what they're seeing in a hazy is yeast suspension. And I think that's where the mistake is it's not yeast suspension. You don't want that yeast all the way to the final glass.
Yeah. Ideally, it's out of there. It's proteins. It's other things that'll, create that mouthfeel and not yeast. All right, so this next question is it's about keeping oxygen down while kegging. And you just sent me a picture about how you were doing it. And, so I think we can kind of reference that, put the picture on the screen. But it's very important. I think packaging beer is when oxygen, you're going to get it in there. So what are some tips to kegging your beer without getting oxygen pickup?
I think the whole thing is encapsulated in one thing. If you can avoid problems, avoid them. I call it closed brewing. And any place I'm transferring, anything I'm doing, if I can avoid it being wide open and inviting everything that's in the air into my beer, the better. So when it comes to kegging, I think that's the easiest one. So this picture shows the loop I have going, and you can do it two ways. I like just the one and done. I take that keg, I fill it up with sanitizer after it's cleaned, of course, and then I purge the entire keg all the way from the very top of liquid, and I used Star San in this, and I just dispense it all out. I'm usually cleaning my beer lines, and I'm going into another bucket that I'll reuse that sanitizer into something else. But now that entire keg is flushed with CO2, not oxygen, but CO2. I'll even go so far on that one as I flipped it upside down and pulled the pressure relief valve also to get out all the little liquid from the bottom. You don't have to go too nuts, but if there's a buildup of liquid, you want to get rid of that. Then I set it up, and I probably went a little too far on this one, but I have it, CO2 tank going onto the X3, the top lid. Then from the floating dip tube, that's going into the keg. And then I put a blow tie, which is a spunding valve, on the keg itself. And so I was able to set its differential, just like my counter pressure bottle fill. I did basically a counter pressure keg fill and filled that keg that way. So again, we're avoiding that oxygen pickup. We're avoiding it being open. We're avoiding any microbes getting in there. So I will have hopefully the freshest, cleanest possible beer when we serve 2 days from now.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I love that approach. A lot of people pull the PRV and kind of turn it sideways, but putting that spunding valve on there, you're making sure there's nothing can make its way back in there. Another tendency people will tend to do is, you put your Star San in there, you'll dump it out and then go to purge it with CO2. But by using Chris's method, where we're pushing the CO2 or pushing the sanitizer out with CO2, we're actually pre-purging that whole vessel. And we talked about it earlier on bottling. If we did dump out the Star San and then try and put gas back in, CO2 is heavier than oxygen, but at some point those two are going to play together and you're still going to have some oxygen.
You're going to pick up some.
You're going to pick up some oxygen. Yeah. So yeah, I love that. Put your sanitizer in there, fill it all the way up to the top or as much as you can, push it out with gas. We've now got a great environment to push that beer into.
And as you can see in the picture, they're at equal levels. The conical is on wheels, so it sits a little bit taller than the keg, but you can't gravity. If you're high enough that you're gravity, you could even have the out of the keg go back in the top of the conical, so the air displacement is displaced with CO2 from the keg as you gravity fill your keg. It's a little less wasteful when it comes to CO2.
Yeah, that's a good, and that actually makes me think of something that I've seen on Brewlosophy, shout out to Brewlosophy, where they'll capture their CO2 from primary fermentation to push out the liquid sanitizer in their keg. So they're like capturing that CO2 so you're not wasting any. So there's all kinds of fun ways to play around with that and, and conserve CO2 and use gases to push liquid around.
And still keep oxygen out of your system.
Oxygen is your enemy.
At that stage.
Well,
that's it. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your questions. Please keep putting your questions down below. We love answering them. We'll send those 3 winners their gift certificates, and we hope to answer your question next.